still remember being in the hospital and crying. My mom kept everything kind of hidden from me. The extent of the injuries were still absolutely there. You could tell. We went to bed one night at 9 o'clock and I woke up with guns all around me.
Long before he was an Ottawa Senator, before being a U.S. Olympian, before scoring highlight reel goals, and before being drafted second overall by the Anaheim Ducks, before it all, Bobby Ryan wasn't Bobby Ryan.
I remember having to tell that lie for years. I didn't have much of a choice. I knew that from now on I was Bobby Ryan.
And we welcome you to Philadelphia as the Flyers host Brett Hull and the St. Louis Blues tonight.
On October 29, 1997, Bobby and his father were at the Core States Arena in Philadelphia, watching their hometown Flyers play the St. Louis Blues.
My favorite player at that time was Brett Hull, so we had kind of mapped this game out for a long time. It was just one of those things that there was no way we weren't going to that game.
It was supposed to be a great night for father and son, but it turned out to be the opposite. After the game, Bobby went to bed and his father went to the local bar. When he returned home, drunk, he became enraged by a message on the phone, and in a fit of uncontrolled anger, he brutally beat his wife.
You know, the things that happened that night I can't ever take back. Obviously, that night changed everything, regardless of what I think I heard and what I believed. It didn't give me the right to do what I did, and I was wrong. And for that, Bobby and Melody paid a big price.
She had, extensive bruises, obviously, some broken bones and cracked ribs, and I don't know if skull fracture or something along those lines.
Was it a shock for you, or had you seen him enraged before? Had he had a temper that scared you at all?
He had a temper, but he never really, he was not very aggressive from a lot of previous arguments that I had seen, and I think obviously all couples argue, but I've never seen anything like that. And I know he was a hard-nosed guy as a dad, but he never raised his voice and was never aggressive with me in any regard. So it absolutely came as a shock to me.
Is that hard to think back to that time? That you were capable of that?
No. No.
You knew you were capable
Yes.
of that?
Yes, that part's not the hard part. The fact that I did it is not, you obviously think you won't do something like that, but it's not the first fight I was in.
I can still remember being in the hospital and crying. To know what had happened and that it was a direct result of my father was tough. But I can really just remember crying for a couple hours at the hospital, and that's about it.
What had you been charged with? What were the charges?
Attempted murder, first degree, burglary, terroristic threats. I believe that was the opening charges.
That's pretty serious stuff.
Yes. Yes. It is.
Life in suburban Cherry Hill, New Jersey, just outside Philadelphia, was pretty normal before that horrifying October night. Bobby was born there, raised there, an only child to parents Bob and Melody. Mom was the homemaker, while Dad worked 9 to 5 as an insurance executive. Bobby attended a Catholic elementary school, and when he wasn't studying, he spent most of his time at the local rink playing hockey.
I had that prototypical hockey family before it all happened, and he, like I said, he's different. He sees it differently than most people. I was up at 5 a.m. 3 mornings a week doing private lessons, and people thought he was insane, but I think he was just trying to prepare me for a work ethic, and I think a lot of people misconstrue that.
People don't like to believe it because they saw somebody that everybody thought was over the top with what I asked them to do, but I believed that if he wanted to be successful at hockey, he had to put the work in, even if he was 8 years old. It was just what I thought he had to learn.
He was looked at as the crazy dad, but he never yelled or did anything like that. He made sure it was my decision all the time. And I hated getting up in the mornings, but nothing felt better than being on the ice while other kids were getting ready and sleeping and going to school.
Even at a young age, Bobby was showing promise on the ice, his talent level exceeding that of his friends and teammates. But the life he knew in Cherry Hill was about to come to an end.
He was on the top 10 fugitive list for the FBI at this point, and it was a manhunt.
On October 29, 1997, Bobby Ryan and his father drove to their suburban New Jersey home after watching a Philadelphia Flyers hockey game. Bobby went straight to bed while his dad dropped by a local pub for a few post-game pints. When he returned, chaos ensued. In a moment of rage, his father had beaten his mother, her injuries severe.
You know, the things that happened that night I can't ever take back. Obviously, that night changed everything.
Bobby wasn't allowed to visit his badly beaten mother in hospital. He didn't know if or when he'd see her again.
They kept me away from my mom for quite a while. When I did finally see her, she was still in the hospital, and I think it was 7 or 8 days later. And she wanted to heal as best she could, but I mean, the extent of the injuries were still absolutely there. You could tell.
How scary was that for you that night?
Very scary, very scary. It was one miserable night, you know, that we all went through a horrendous ordeal. You know, alcohol changes people, circumstances change people, and we weren't in a good place.
What I remember is that my mom hadn't pressed charges. She had decided not to. And it was going to be one of those domestic disturbance abuse things that was going to go away.
They put an emergency restraining order, so he wasn't even allowed to see Bobby or myself.
But you would have wanted to?
Yeah, well, I wanted him to see Bobby. I mean, that was his life. That was his most important, you know, thing in his life, and he had been through the ordeal as well. And I don't know that I would have wanted to see him at that time, but I wanted him to be able to see his son.
I remember the lady that was pressing the charges was the attorney, and I don't think my dad had any inclination that he was going to be okay. I think he knew he was going to do some time.
You know, prison was there. We knew that would happen. The goal would have been that the sentence would have been not too long. Didn't go that way. They were looking for a much longer sentence.
I know he was released on bail. And I know that he skipped a date in court and took off.
Obviously, you're not supposed to run from something, but I felt that if I was taken away at that point, I couldn't provide. So I decided I was going to leave. I had already gotten new identification.
You had a different alias then?
I did.
What was it?
Kramer.
Where did that come from?
A friend of mine's, he lost a son or a brother when he was born at a young age.
Under the alias Kramer, Bobby's dad was on the run and began the search for a new home, a new life away from Cherry Hill, New Jersey.
I know he went to Peterborough and to Banff and was trying to find a hockey spot, somewhere that I could kind of play and be off the radar.
He was calling me from all different places around the country, and he found 2 coaches out in California.
Who would have thought California would have been a spot that we end up, but tried to find a place where I thought he could continue with hockey. And I would assume most people would think that was nuts to think that's what you were worried about, but it's what I was worried about.
While Bobby's father was settling in California, mother and son were still on the East Coast in New Jersey.
I remember we would be in the car and people would be following us because they thought my dad was in the back seat and things like that. And
like the police were following you,
yeah,
looking for your father.
Yeah, undercover cars, and I remember writing license plates down all the time and, you know, hiding out in essentially your own neighborhood.
So at what point then, once you've gotten to California, do you have Melody and Bobby come join you? How did that work?
I was gone at that point about 7 months. I think I was in California for 3 at that point. And then he flew out for a tryout. And they said bring him back for their AAA team. And then he went home that time, and then Melody made arrangements to come out.
We left one night at midnight, and I remember meeting my dad in Washington, D.C. I don't know how he got there or how that transpired. I just remember being asleep in the back seat, and I could hear my dad's voice outside, and I knew we were meeting him, I just didn't know where. And my mom kept everything kind of hidden from me, even just to not burden me with too much. But we met and drove across the country as a family. I think it was the first time we were together as a group in a long time.
So a part of that resettling is becoming new people.
Yes.
So describe that conversation.
Well, there really wasn't a conversation. It just we had no choice. I mean, they wanted Bobby's birth certificate at that point, and fortunately we were just able to fax it, so I just changed the last name.
I didn't have much of a choice. I knew that from now on I was Bobby Ryan. My dad picked his last name because of a movie. And
because of a movie?
Saving Private Ryan.
That's where he took it from.
I just watched it. I don't know why it stuck in my mind, and it was an easy name. It was 4 letters. It was easy to forge and put on the birth certificate, and it's Irish, so that helped.
Bob Stevenson, the father, became Shane Ryan, and Robert Stevenson, the son, became Bobby Ryan.
Do you remember ever slipping up along the way, or?
I remember a few instances, yeah. Playing local roller hockey with the kids right in my community, and then roller hockey being so prominent in California, and me playing for, the best team in the country, which was a local Jersey team. The kids knew who I was when I got there. I remember that being the hardest, because they're like, we remember you, your picture's in this book. It said Robert Stevenson right in the book, and all that, and I said, no, I'm Bobby Ryan, and I remember having to tell that lie for years.
There were a couple people that said to me, I knew. Yeah, so.
Bob, now Shane, didn't jump bail to save himself. He wasn't afraid of prison. He hid from authorities to protect his only child.
My parents both agreed on it, that it was the right thing to do, that it was, imperative that I have a fully functioning family system at that time, even as different as it was. And it was, like I said, it felt like a long-term vacation, the way it panned out.
They were fun days. I mean, look, to say that is because of the reasons for it is kind of, I guess it's kind of arrogant, but we hung on the beach. We played roller hockey around the corner every day. He skated whenever he wanted to skate. We went to the gym, we worked out. I can't get those, I can't trade that. Most people don't get an opportunity to do that. Those days were good days for all 3 of us.
But would the charade last? How could it? A simple slip-up could ruin everything. And it did.
They had SWAT teams come in, and they actually were holding like shields in front of them, and they had these big giant guns. It was so scary.
The family formerly known as the Stevensons, now the Ryans, were in hiding. After being charged with attempted murder, Bob Stevenson skipped bail, moved from New Jersey to California, and changed his name to Shane Ryan. Joining him on the run were the wife he had brutally assaulted and their young son, with his new name, Bobby Ryan.
I think I knew this wasn't going to last forever, but the way I understood it was that my dad just wanted to get me on the right path, whether it was hockey or school, and then I think he had always planned to turn himself in.
The FBI and U.S. Marshals were still searching for Bob Stevenson, and a careless mistake would lead them to the fugitive.
He used a Blockbuster card under an old alias that was being tracked apparently by the FBI, and I don't know what the time frame was between when he used it and when they tracked him down, but I remember they came in with like 30 or 40 guys.
They had SWAT teams come in, and they actually were holding like shields in front of them, and they had these big, giant guns.
I was sleeping right in the living room on the pull-out couch. My parents were in the loft, so I was the first person they saw, and they kind of stood around the foot of the bed and kept me where I was.
I could hear them, and I could see them, and my son was in that bed. And I mean, I could have jumped off of there.
I woke up with guns all around me and pinning me down and whatnot.
Both of us were screaming for Bobby because, you know, you see guns and he's right down there and you can't get to him. So we were both screaming. That was more scary than anything in my life.
There was a reason they came in that way. What the Camden County prosecutors here did was when they issued the bail jumping indictment, they left the attempted part off. So they believed they were kicking in the door looking for a murder suspect.
They came up the steps and pinned him down, you know, on the bed and, you know, did what they had to do. But then I got down. But at first, they were coming up and I couldn't even get down to hold him or be with him. It was horrible.
You know, my dad naturally probably would have fought, but I think he understood the gravity of the situation at the time it happened and you know, walked right out with them and gave me a hug and a kiss goodbye as he was being handcuffed and ushered out the door. I don't remember a whole lot after that. That was kind of the toughest time for me. It was right when he left. I knew it was essentially going to be a long time before I saw him again.
I don't know how he handled that in some part in his mind, but I think he has. I hope he has.
How did life change for you and Bobby then?
Oh, a lot. I had to change everything. I didn't have a choice, and it was a struggle. It was very hard.
We were at this really weird crossroads. We didn't have, you know, the financial system to set up and stay there. California is not cheap. But my mom kind of, you know, kept it together for that year.
I worked during the day at the rink, and he would come and play open hockey with the men, and I would go to work at the airport at night. So I went to work at the airport thinking that because they were such a good team, there weren't a lot of teams to play in California. So they always had to travel. So I thought, well, if I work at the airport, I can get them on free or cheaper flights.
I still don't understand how she did it. You know, she's a much stronger woman than I ever thought she was, and I learned that for the last couple of years over there. You know, she took on way more than any single lady, I guess at this point you can call her that, had to do.
With his father incarcerated in a New Jersey prison, the family secret began to leak out. At that point, Bobby had a decision to make about his identity.
I said to him, you need to decide. You can become Stevenson again if you want, but, you know, it's your choice. He didn't hesitate. He said, I want to be Ryan. I said, that's who I am.
It was really weird that I didn't want to go back to my other name. And I don't know if it was because I didn't want to be associated with everything that had happened, or if it was because I was getting some recognition throughout the country for hockey, or what it was that made me want to keep that name. But I liked it, and I felt more comfortable with it at that point for some reason.
Bob was released from prison after Bobby was drafted into the Ontario Hockey League. Despite being a free man, a restraining order was issued by the state of New Jersey. Bob was not to have any contact with his wife.
I had gone to court, I think 7 times, asking them to drop the restraining order, that I did not want it anymore.
I knew that they weren't supposed to be seeing each other, and what are you going to tell your parents, right? I mean, they're going to do what they want anyway, so I just made sure I kept it quiet.
Did you ever, though, have any concerns for your mother's welfare?
I did, but there was never any sign of it, so I never quite picked up on it, I guess. You know, it seemed like there was a good amount of time in those years that she did absolutely zero for herself, but I think that's how she healed too. You know, her perseverance through it all was incredible.
Bobby's NHL dream was on the verge of coming true, and his father wasn't going to miss it. Despite the state-imposed restraining order, Bob and Melody joined Bobby for the 2005 draft in Ottawa.
He was out before the draft, so he skipped the country and came to my draft. There was no way he was missing it.
Were you supposed to be there?
Yes.
What had you
Together,
done
no.
to...
It wouldn't have been fun to go to the draft without permission and then go back to prison, but I guess...
He would have gone anyway. He would have gone anyway.
Maybe, probably.
Yeah. He had missed a little bit too much at that point. He was going.
It never really dawned on me it was the NHL draft day, too. It just dawned on me as one of those things where you are with your family, and we hadn't had many of those, so I cherished that a lot more than the draft, to be honest with you.
The Anaheim Mighty Ducks are very pleased to select from the Canadian Hockey League the Owen Sound Attack, Bobby Ryan.
Would you ever imagine that he could be as well-adjusted and lovely a guy as he is?
No. Even with all the research we had done, everyone told me he was a good kid. Everyone told me he was polite. Everyone told me he was sunny. Everyone told me he was happy. Everyone told me he was respectful. And I went in prepared to not like this kid. I went in prepared to, I wanted him to fail, part of me, because I thought this is too good to be true. I want to find that hole that no one else sees. I want to take somebody else. And he blew it right out of the water.
After getting drafted, we did the media, whatever you have to do, and then we had a really nice family dinner and we went our separate ways. I went to Owen Sound and they went home, and my dad went right to jail.
When I returned, I was told that because my wife was there at the draft, which you would think they would expect she would be there, it's his mother, that there was a violation in their minds of parole, and they put me on house arrest for 18 months.
These parents love this boy. You know, there's one thing that's very clear is that both these parents would, and you could argue did, do anything for this kid.
Despite no longer having to hide the family secret, Bobby still wasn't completely comfortable with his past.
I had gone through counseling, and you know, I pretty guarded for the most part, so counselors didn't quite know what to do with me. It wasn't until the year after the story had come out that I realized I needed a lot of help with this. It was Brian Burke who pushed me in the right direction.
I believe that, you know, you can see where difficulties in someone's life or setbacks in their life have really rocked them and they're not in recovery. There are things where sports psychologists can really help that are not related to performance. This is all family issues and all the things that a normal person deals with. Forget the job.
I had so many other things in my personal life that were on my mind that being the number 2 overall pick seemed so irrelevant to me, because I was trying to develop a relationship with my father who had just gotten out. I was trying to make sure my mom was okay and on her feet. I wasn't even sure if I wanted to play hockey at that point.
Brian Burke recommended Bobby visit Dana Sinclair, a Toronto-based sports psychologist, to help overcome his off-ice issues.
I remember listening to her talk to Bobby once. The fact that you boo-hoo had a tough past, guess what? That doesn't count right now. Doesn't count to your teammates, and it sure as hell doesn't count to the guys on the other side of the ice. So guess what? Stop using it. When it comes time to perform, you put those things aside.
She saved my career, really. She's been the best thing I've ever done.
I'm very proud of Bobby. I think, you know, that's a draft pick that I'm going to be able to brag about for a long time, I think.
Bobby Ryan has come to terms with his situation. It's no longer an issue. Melody and Bob are still married, happily living together in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. Father and son kept the Ryan last name, while Melody remains a Stevenson.
From the outside looking in, a lot of people are probably going to look and think, wow, they're still together. How do you explain it?
That goes to, that question gets asked of her, not me.
It's meant to be that way. It's meant to be that way. And a lot of it was for Bobby. We went through a lot of those years. You know, we're staying together as a family. And my husband came from a broken family, a divorced family, and very, very much believes that, you know, we're not doing that to our son.
My family's happy, they're together, they're home in New Jersey, and you know, I'm here, and we got through it. That's the underlying message.
You're a lucky man.
I know. I didn't deserve it. Her and Bobby, I didn't deserve either one of them to still be there when I came home.
Do you think he is proud of what you've been able to accomplish?
I like to think so. We still don't really have that relationship where we talk about those kind of things, but I like to think so.
So if Bobby were here, what would you say to him?
Tell him that we're very, very, very proud of him. And not just the hockey.
Bobby Ryan, that is you.
That is me, 100%.